the reaction to the attitude of your generation, which was, we can joke with each other, right? We can make fun of each other's sex, we can make fun of each other's race, we can make fun of each other's religion.
Yeah.
The reaction to that was political correctness, which was, you will make fun of nothing. And we will not even, not only will we not traffic in stereotypes, if you even make a joke about a stereotype, even if the stereotype is rooted in reality, that makes you a bad person.
Yeah.
And then when you realize that, wait a second, that new reality doesn't exist, where everybody is an equivalent widget and every single thing is identical, then of course we're angry, because it's like, okay, you've told us we can't actually talk about our differences, because that's bad. To talk about our differences is bad. And then you've said that there are no differences, but that's a lie. So now this is what makes people angry. It makes people feel bottled up, because we recognize that what you're telling us is a lie, but you've also told us that if we say that it's a lie, then we have transgressed. Right? The attempt to silence is what generates the anger, right? It didn't go back to warmth, because we're not allowed to make the warm joke. If I make the warm joke, then it doesn't matter. Like, if I make a joke about women, I have to think twice. Am I going to get boycotted now if I make a joke about women? Whereas I can make jokes about women in front of my wife, no problem.
Of course.
And she'll make jokes about men, and that's how it works. And with my friends of other races, we make jokes about each other. I mean, Jeremy's a Christian, I'm a Jew. All we do all day is just make jokes about each other's religion. I mean, but you can't do that in public, because if you do that in public, then people immediately hit you with the "you have harmed someone" narrative.
Oh, they pretend to take it seriously, so as if you had really said something.
That's my favorite. Yeah, exactly.
And this, this is the way men form bonds and relationships. Is that if you get out of the system that you're in, say you're in the military, say you're a group of writers in a writer's room, whatever you're in, you make fun of them. You start to rib each other, and that's kind of the way you start to establish like who's going where and where the boundaries are and all this stuff. And then you become like this kind of machine. Men become this band of people. If you can't do that, men can't actually mature. They can't mentor each other. They can't teach each other what each one knows and pass it on. It's very crippling. Humor, to not be able to use humor like that is very crippling.
One of the things that's been amazing and weird is that I think there was a fundamental misconception by women about the quote-unquote patriarchy and the patriarchal society. And what it led to was this, we've talked about sort of the false feeling about what men are. Men are brutal and terrible and evil, and everything about men is bad. And when they evidence masculinity, that's because all masculinity is in some form toxic and aggressive. And if we just wiped away the testosterone, then all of society would be rainbows and candy. But George Gilder wrote a book that's now being reissued. Now it's called Men in Marriage. And his basic thesis is that we never lived in a patriarchy. We always lived in a matriarchy. And the reason, but it was good, because the matriarchy, what he meant by that was not that men didn't have power. Men had an awful lot of power. But it's that the fundamental presupposition of civilization was that male patterns of being had to subordinate themselves to female patterns of being. Meaning that it was male strength, because if males on their own will be evil. Males on their own, just in the wild, they will hunt and they will kill and they will rape and they will do just awful, evil things, which is exactly what you see in hunter-forager societies very often. You don't see a lot of social bonds. You see men who are moving around and sort of abandoning kids, and that's very common. And you see it in anarchic societies. It remains very common to this day. So his proposition is that male toxicity is then linked with the female time horizon. So the male time horizon is, when do I next get laid? The female time horizon is, you have sex and then you generate a child over the course of months, and then you raise the child over the course of years. And so the male mode of being has to be subordinated to the female mode of being in order for civilization to be created. So all that aggressiveness gets channeled toward actually the quote-unquote matriarchy, like the female mode of actually building, because women are there to build things, but they need men to actually do the building. And so what men trade away is that kind of moment-to-moment autonomy in favor of something significantly more meaningful, but they have to restrict themselves in order to do that, and that's what builds civilization. And so what the feminists did is they said, no, that's the patriarchy. When they made the absurd contention that marriage is a patriarchal institution, when it is precisely the reverse. It is a bunch of obligations for men that would not exist but for the absence of, but for the presence of marriage. When they made that contention, when they succeeded with that contention, then what they did is they actually subverted the authority that they had in society, which was connected to their very biology. They subverted that. And now men were unbound from that, and they went back to being what they were in the free battle days. And women were nothing? I mean, and that's what's happening. Women are becoming
nothing.
copies
They don't
copies
exist.
of men. I mean,
That's right.
like men can be women. I mean, it's,
See, this to me is like a major theological point, and I think, and as a matter of fact, I think that is what it is. I think it goes beyond. Freud said everything comes down to sex. I think sex actually is a symbol of something way beyond that. Men and women become one flesh because there are two ways of looking at the world. The world is actually a multiverse, and this is what I think there is a way that you would call the way of power, where it's full of envy and ambition and conflict, which is the masculine way. That is the way we are built. And then there is the way that is the way of love, which is that all of these things are good, but they have to be transformed by love. And I think that when a man and woman become one flesh, that is the kind of unity. You actually are modeling something that is beyond human. And I think that's, if you look, I go back all the time, 500 years. I feel that we are at the end of an argument that has been going on for 500 years when basically the church broke up and they discovered science and all this stuff. And if you go to the Germans, it was all philosophy and it was all about power. It was all, Schopenhauer would just say there's no morality, there's just different power going in, and there was the will to power, and that was what Nietzsche would talk about, the will to power and all this. But you go to England, where everybody's gay, obviously. You just listen to the way they talk. but then you get the poets, and the poets, especially Coleridge, they love the Germans, but they're poets, and so they have a certain kind of creative anima, more feminine way, and they bring that stuff together into a much more real world. I think I'm not kidding about this. I think this is why Shakespeare, when he has Portia argue for Christianity in The Merchant of Venice, I think that's why he makes her a woman dressed as a man. He's basically saying, the mercy that she's talking about is a feminine trait, but the law that she's talking about is a masculine trait. So she's both. In that moment, she becomes both. And I think this is the reason it's tearing.
Putting aside the anti-Semitism of Merchant of Venice,
it is anti-Semitic.
But you're correct. I mean, the biblical notion that this goes all the way back to the Bible, the idea that God is both justice and mercy, and that mercy is described in the Bible using feminine language, and justice is described in the Bible using masculine language. Right. In the Hebrew, that's the way it is. Right? That is literally in the grammar of the Bible, and the way that you learn about the names of God, typically, is that the more masculine attributes of God are considered din, and then which is justice, and then the more feminine version is rachamim, which is
And what kid doesn't see that in his mother and father if they're healthy, adult human beings? That's why when we mess with this stuff, and we on the right get so upset about it, and they kind of complain. They think, well, what's business is it of yours? And sure, in an individual, it's no business of mine. Do I care whether some guy wants to walk down the street in a dress? No, I don't. But when the society loses that sense that something urgent is going on beyond this life, that there is no reference point to flesh. There's just flesh. It doesn't refer to anything else. Once they lose that, they literally are doing what the most pencil-necked, low IQ country preacher told them they were going to be doing. You're going down the road to sin. Well, that's essentially what they're doing.
Yeah. So I'll disagree with you. I think that it is bad if a man walks down the street in a dress. If a man,
I didn't say it wasn't bad. It's none of my business.
I do care. So I don't care. You want to do it in the privacy of your own home. I care in the sense that as a spiritual being, I think you're degrading yourself, and I think that you're doing something wrong to yourself.
Yes.
But from a sort of governmental perspective.
Right.
I don't think that the government's preserve is to go into private domains where you are in your own house doing a thing by yourself and not affecting anyone else. With that, as a general rule, although obviously I'm against suicide and all the rest, what we have done as a society, though, is we flip private and public, right? Everything that is private is now public, and everything that ought to be public is now private. So religion ought to be a public thing, because it turns out that religion is the way that people interact with the world when they believe that God is a real thing and that morality is a real thing. And we've decided, no, that's relegated to your bedroom. How you screw, that's out in the streets. That's what makes you a hero is being Sam Britton donning ladies' wear. And until you steal luggage, you're perfectly normal. Until you steal luggage, you're handling the country's nuclear waste. That's the stuff that needs to be public. The relegation of religion to the private square and sex to the public square is the reversal of what things were supposed to be.